Hello and welcome, everyone. A few weeks ago, I put out a video that took a look at Paul Revere, his famous ride, and the Paul Revere Silver Round, which is issued by the Money Metals Exchange. Today, I'll be looking at another pivotal event involving Paul Revere, this time the Boston Massacre. We'll take a look at the event itself, and then we'll take a look at this fabulous Boston Massacre Silver Round I picked up from the Native American Mint. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. If you're not a subscriber, I do humbly ask that you subscribe, and please share any comments that you may have. Okay, to start out with, I just want to provide a brief overview of the Boston Massacre. The Boston Massacre is one of the better-known events in American history, certainly one of the better-known events in the lead-up to the American Revolution. As I noted, I've done a previous video on Paul Revere. I've also done one on the Boston Tea Party, the Constitution, and the Declaration of Independence. So I will put links to those in the description in case you're interested in any of those. Today we're going to focus particularly on the Boston Massacre, which took place on March 5th in the year 1770. I'm going to provide a few excerpts from a nice overview that was provided by the History Channel website. The Boston Massacre was a deadly riot that occurred on March 5, 1770 on King Street in Boston. It began as a street brawl between American colonists and a lone British soldier, but quickly escalated to a chaotic, bloody slaughter. The conflict energized anti-British sentiment and paved the way for the American Revolution. Now, tensions ran high in Boston in early 1770. More than 2,000 British soldiers occupied the city of 16,000 colonists and tried to enforce Britain's tax laws. American colonists rebelled against taxes they found repressive, rallying around the cry, "No taxation without representation." Skirmishes between colonists and soldiers and between patriot colonists and colonists loyal to Britain, known as loyalists, were increasingly common. To protest taxes, patriots often vandalized stores selling British goods and intimidated store merchants and their customers. On the frigid, snowy evening of March 5, 1770, Private Hugh White was the only soldier guarding the king's money stored inside the custom house on King Street. It wasn't long before angry colonists joined him and insulted him and threatened violence. At some point, White fought back and struck a colonist with his bayonet. In retaliation, the colonists pelted him with snowballs, ice, and stones. Bells began ringing throughout the town, usually a warning of fire, sending a mass of male colonists into the streets. As the assault on White continued, he eventually fell and called for reinforcements. In response to White's plea and fearing mass riots and the loss of the king's money, Captain Thomas Preston arrived on the scene with several soldiers and took up a defensive position in front of the custom house. The violence escalated and the colonists struck the soldiers with clubs and sticks. Reports differ as to what exactly happened next, but after someone supposedly said the word fire, a soldier fired his gun, although it's unclear if the discharge was intentional. Once the first shot rang out, other soldiers opened fire, killing 5 colonists. Within hours, Preston and his soldiers were arrested and jailed, and the propaganda machine was in full force on both sides of the conflict. Paul Revere encouraged anti-British attitudes by etching a now famous engraving depicting British soldiers callously murdering the American colonists. It showed the British soldiers as the instigators, though the colonists had started the fight. It took 7 months to arraign Preston and the other soldiers involved in the Boston Massacre and bring them to trial. Ironically, it was American colonist, lawyer, and future President of the United States, John Adams, who defended them. Adams was no fan of the British, but wanted Preston and his men to receive a fair trial. After all, the death penalty was at stake, and the colonists didn't want the British to have an excuse to even the score. Certain that impartial jurors were non-existent in Boston, Adams convinced the judge to seat a jury of non-Bostonians. During Preston's trial, Adams argued that confusion that night was rampant. Eyewitnesses presented contradictory evidence on whether Preston had ordered his men to fire on the colonists. Adams argued that reasonable doubt existed. Preston was found not guilty. The remaining soldiers claimed self-defense and were all found not guilty of murder. Two of them, Hugh Montgomery and Matthew Kilroy, were found guilty of manslaughter and were branded on the thumbs as first offenders per English law. To Adams and the jury's credit, the British soldiers received a fair trial despite the vitriol felt towards them and their country. The Boston Massacre had a major impact on relations between Britain and the American colonists. It further incensed colonists already weary of British rule and unfair taxation and roused them to fight for independence. Okay, so that's a pretty good short overview of what happened that night. This image here on the screen is a grave marker marking the grave of the 5 men that were killed during the Boston Massacre. They are Samuel Gray, Samuel Maverick, James Caldwell, Crispus Attucks, and Patrick Carr. And they are buried in the Granary graveyard in the city of Boston. Now, the etching that, or engraving that Paul Revere made was distributed throughout the colonies. It was basically reproduced, put in papers, pamphlets, leaflets, and it was distributed all throughout the colonies. The title that was included with it was The Bloody Massacre Perpetrated in King Street, Boston, on March 5th, 1770, by a party of the 29th Regiment. So this was an event that the Sons of Liberty, which were a revolutionary group, one of the key leaders was Sam Adams. This was an event that they definitely sought to exploit and take advantage of to rally people against the crown. It did escalate tensions and emotions, but the building towards the independence, towards the revolution, was one that took place over time. Okay, you could argue that the very first provocations that upset the colonists happened back in 1763, and it wasn't until 1776 that they actually ended up issuing the Proclamation of Independence, or as we more commonly call it, the Declaration of Independence. So this is the famous etching by Paul Revere, and it is represented here on this beautiful silver round. This is a 2-ounce silver round. I picked mine up through J.M. Bullion, but it may have been available at some other retailers as well. And you can see there on the front side it says Boston Massacre 250th Anniversary. Okay, so March 5th of this year was the 250th anniversary of the Boston Massacre. And you have kind of the city seen in the background there, the colonists on the left, and the British soldiers firing on the right. Now, I generally am not a big fan of colorized coins when it comes to silver and the like, but this one I really like. The way it just captures the Paul Revere image and just brings that history right to you. Just really incredible. And I decided to show it here with a picture as opposed to video because I thought we'd get a little better detail. But the silver parts of the coin are very much a very mirror-like finish. So it is really beautiful. Now the reverse of it is pictured here. And this one is kind of has your more traditional look of a silver coin around. At the top it says America. And it has an eagle on top of a tree. Now that's the Liberty Tree. The Liberty Tree was located either near Boston Common or right on Boston Common. And it was a gathering point for some of the patriots from time to time, and it came to be a symbol of liberty for many of the people in Boston. In the foreground, you have a gathering of a number of colonists, and they are sort of gathered at the bottom of the tree. There's inscription. If you look right below the eagle in the middle of the tree, it says Jamul Sovereign Nation. So as I mentioned earlier, this round is issued by the Native American Mint. And we'll talk more about the Native American Mint in a moment. But one of the Native American groups in the country is the Jamul Sovereign Nation. And they're the ones that are, issuing, sponsoring this coin. It has a $2 face value, 2020. Now, that is not U.S. legal tender. The $2 value, what weight that carries if you're within the boundaries of the Jamul sovereign nation, I'm not really sure how that would work, but they did put a dollar value on the coin. I can't remember if I mentioned, but this is a 2-ounce coin. It's rather thin, and it's got a pretty significant diameter to it. I think it's 65 or 67 millimeters in diameter. So thin and big would be the way to describe it. Okay, so just a very neat coin. It has that history theme that I like so much. And it had quite a hefty premium on it, however. So that is something worth noting. I picked this at a time when the spot price was a good bit lower than it is now. But I decided to make a little splurge, bought myself a present, and this will definitely be going in the permanent stack. Now, just briefly, talking about the Native American Mint, I wasn't really familiar with the Native American Mint, but they have this kind of little descriptor on their website, so I just wanted to go over that quickly. It says there is a 400-year-long history of Native American designs and images being featured on coins and currency in North America. Today, tribes are choosing to tell their individual tribal histories by issuing coins as sovereign nations. Commemorative coins are approved by tribal authorities and issued with denominations in various precious metals. For tribes, coins are an important demonstration of sovereign status, spread tribal history, culture, and recognition, become a part of the tribal patrimony, and provide royalties to help improve life on reservations. For the collector, coins are a recognition of issuing legitimacy, open the door to tribal history and culture, often offer an opportunity to own a unique item that can appreciate in value in the future, and help support unprivileged Native American people. Okay, so if you go on the website or on eBay even, they have a variety of different types of coins out there. I guess they would be coins because they're given a dollar value. As I said, not legal tender for the United States, but they have a lot of neat designs. Oftentimes they will have some sort of a Native American representation on one side, an image of a chief or a warrior or something like that, and then oftentimes an animal on the other side, a buffalo or an otter, something of that nature. So if you have interest in that sort of thing, you might want to go dig into those, check them out, see if there's anything you might want to pick up. So anyways, that's it for today. Thank you for coming along on the journey. I hope you all have a great day or evening, and this is CoinHound signing off.